Good morning, this is Orina. Today's episode of the podcast will be about trauma and its treatment and approaches to healing trauma. We'll talk about this, the connections between body and mind, and a very, very special method of working with trauma. So somatic experiencing, developed by Dr. Peter Levine. But before we start, I would like to say that this is the first time this podcast is released in English, so I'm quite nervous, and also I'm sorry for any mistakes in advance. I hope there will be just a little bit of them. But just to tell you, for those of you who haven't had a chance to listen to this podcast, because it's usually in Polish, I would like to just briefly say what is it about. So we're looking in the podcast into methods of holistic approach to health, mainly looking into how can we support ourselves on physical, mental, emotional level in this broaden integrative perspective, and also treatment, and also prevention of chronic diseases. So this is what we're interested in, and I have a huge privilege to welcome amazing guests and talk to them and ask them about their perspective of health building. And today with me, Dave Berger. Hello, Dave.
Hello. Hello.
I'm really honored, and I'm very happy to be able to talk to you today, and welcome in Poland.
Thank you. It's been great to be here so far. Yeah.
Please let me introduce you. Dave, you are a somatic psychotherapist, a physical therapist, and body worker. This is the shortened version of your bio, and of all the practices that you are familiar with, and all the practices that you teach also. So as we talked on the way, you have over 40 years of experience in teaching, in also practicing all the methods, psychosomatic, if I say it correctly, work with patients also. You're specially dedicated to somatic experiencing work and practice, as you lead courses, advanced courses. And maybe I can let you speak now also what is very interesting and important also to highlight about your work.
Well, first, thank you for having me. This is very exciting to be here. What's important, I've watched the field of integrative healthcare grow over the course of 30 or 40 years, and that's exciting. And the recognition that it's not just our physical body or our emotions or our relationships as separate entities, but really understanding more and more that we are all one big system, and everything, it's like a city, any city. This street doesn't exist by itself. It's part of the city. So we're looking at really the interrelationship of all of these components. And you use the phrase body and mind. And really, it's a continuum. It's one big physiological system, let's say, with a lot of parts to it that work together. So this is exciting that this recognition is increasing more and more.
Can I ask you, how did it start for you? This interest?
Yeah, this interest started so long ago.
Because I guess it wasn't that popular at the time. Because now we have seen in Poland, I'm very interested how it is in the US, where you come from.
Yeah.
But I can observe by our foundation, I haven't said also in the introduction, for those of you who don't know, I am also usually I am an actress, but also I co-lead a foundation here that is dedicated to holistic approach to health and integrative medicine and developing it in Poland, and health education. But this has been past few years that I can observe this amazing growth of interest in holistic approach, in complementary approach. So we are seeing and broadening our perspective. But I guess when you started, that wasn't a popular thing, right?
I don't even know how much existed, really. There were elements of society, of healing arts society, that understood this, but now we're talking back in the era that I was in college, late 70s, mid to late 70s, when I was interested, probably having heard something in a yoga class back then that stimulated me to look around and say, how could I get any of this as a college student? So I actually designed...
What did you study?
I designed my own curriculum and made up my own major at University of Maryland.
Really?
They were allowed us to do that, And I called it somatopsychology. I created the name. I thought psychosomatic...
So you are a pioneer.
I'm a pioneer. Psychosomatic has a very negative connotation, implying pathology. And so I reversed the term. Everything we do is psychosomatic. If I suggest to you to go open the door, you have to think about it. There's an affect associated with and a physical action.
Sure.
Everything we do.
Sure.
And of course, there was nobody at the University of Maryland or anywhere else I could find that could teach me this kind of more complete whole approach. So I took courses from a variety of different fields, including psychology and biology and education and sociology, and combined that with all the requirements for a graduate program in physical therapy. And I chose physical therapy because I love how the body functions. And if I went into psychology, I thought, I'm going to have to listen to people complain all the time. And I don't want to do that. So to shorten a very long story, I grad programmed physical therapy, worked in neurological rehab. People have head injury, stroke, multiple sclerosis, and a lot in pediatrics. And then started diving into the world of body work. And it was, I don't even know if it was called complementary or alternative back then, but found my way into working with people with chronic pain. And that's when I did go back to a second graduate program in psychology, specifically in somatic psychology. And that was in the early 1990s. And then the rest is just sort of...
It developed by itself, like kind of like one leading to another thing.
Exactly. And it was in that program, not as part of the graduate program, but as an invitation to add to it, that I started my training in 1993 with Peter Levine, who founded and developed somatic experiencing.
How did you hear? I'll ask you about somatic experiencing, but the interesting thing, like, how did you hear about it at the beginning when it was just developing, right? So it was just
he started developing it in his doctoral work at UC Berkeley in the late 60s, early 70s. And so he was developing this method that eventually he named somatic experiencing in the 70s.
So you were one of the first students, right? You had to be.
I was early, before there was a formal training. Yeah. And then I took some time off from it, became a professor in physical therapy and psychology, came back into it, and all of a sudden there was a formal training, and I did that in the late 1990s. Yeah. And so one thing led to the next,
I have this question that just came to my mind when you were speaking about like complementary, alternative, also somatic experiencing, that we will talk in a second. But how do you see this change now if we're in this field of integrative, holistic, complementary approaches, even in terms of names, right? Because alternative has this very strong suggestion already that it is something alternative to main, say, idea, main path, so conventional.
Yeah.
How do you see that changing over the years? How do you see, where do you place yourself with all your work?
Yeah, it's a great question. For a long time, I would say, give a decade, give a name. That would be the same thing, but the name would change from alternative to complementary to this to that. And integrative seems to have taken hold. Although if we think back, hundreds and thousands of years and different cultures like Eastern medicine, it's been integrative
always
and holistic always.
Yeah.
And then it became reductionistic, and that's a whole other conversation. I actually worked at one of the very first centers for integrative medicine in the United States.
What was it?
Center for Integrative Medicine in Concord, New Hampshire, where I lived for a very long time. And I started with them right before the doors opened in 1999, and it was open for 15 years.
It's closed now?
It closed after I left, typical of integrative medicine, because insurance doesn't cover a lot of the practices. It makes it difficult financially, although that's changing also, especially in the world of cancer, where oncologists, to their brilliance, realize we don't have all the answers yet, and we need to look at a bigger approach. Chronic pain is the same way, I think. Those two fields, immunology, psychoimmunology, recognize there's a bigger picture here than reductionistic medicine. And I think because, and this is my personal opinion, because integrative has been attached to the word medicine, it's taking hold now.
Okay, so do you approve it having this medicine kind of like a part to it, that it helps really into integrating it with conventional, because sometimes I feel that it's so not regulated with the names, with the what is what. The questions are always there. So maybe conventional medicine, conventional way may feel a bit threatened by something another way, which for me should be just one broaden perspective of, as you say, bigger picture.
You and I are on the same page with that. I agree, and I do understand the threat. You have to remember, I come from both worlds. I worked in traditional or allopathic Western medicine as a physical therapist, and I do all the other things that I do, so I understand why different models can feel threatened. Financially, egos get involved, training is a particular way, and people feel threatened whether it's a medical doctor with great training or an acupuncturist with great training. People can feel threatened until they open their perspective up and say, oh, not only do I not have all the answers, but I can ask for assistance. I can learn. I can continue learning. So there's a bigger picture. So I think that things are moving in a very positive way, and gradually things like medical schools, physical therapy programs, schools, other acupuncture schools, dietitians, etc., are broadening their understanding that we need to have all of it. I've recently had, a couple of years ago, I had a total hip replacement. I wanted a very skilled orthopedic surgeon that didn't practice a lot of alternatives. I wanted him to know his specialty, and he was great. But also, I had acupuncture, and I used supplements, dietary supplements, hands-on work to support the healing process. And it's like I never had a hip replacement. And a lot of people will say that about a hip replacement, but I've had other surgeries. I've had a lot of clients also who look before, during, and after to have a much broader picture and do really well. Yeah.
Thank you, because you just actually answered a question that I had in my mind, like what this integrative way can actually give us. Like, why is it? I wouldn't say needed, but why would we say we should follow this direction? But you just actually answered it by saying, like, how faster we can get better, and the quality of life may just be supported.
Yeah.
I do have like to wrap up maybe this part before before going into somatic experiencing and trauma. That is like extremely interesting. I just would like to ask you, what can we do in order to loosen up a little bit these, polarized views towards each other, these maybe threats or fears that we have, that the other perspective may be threatening our own. So if we stick to both these, if we talk about alternate versus, what can we do on a daily basis to open up?
Very good question, and it's not just a healthcare question; it's a political question.
Yeah,
it's every possible
all
level.
levels.
If we can have one-to-one conversations in healthcare, if one client or one patient can tell their nurse practitioner or physician about something that they've had, let's say it's acupuncture, or they've seen a dietitian and shifted how they eat, and now they're feeling better. And that one physician or nurse practitioner can listen and just be curious. So the conversation has to be one of curiosity and interest, not one of defensiveness. And that becomes the big issue. It's like, doctor, I just had this most interesting thing happen since our last visit. Let's say someone with chronic pain. I changed how I was eating, and I had acupuncture. And in addition to the medication you've given me, I'm feeling a lot better. Do you think there might be something useful in this? Right. So it's an idea, a way of talking that invites the provider. And you might have that same conversation with the acupuncturist or the herbal medicine provider. In that same way, it's a conversation that invites people to be curious about each other, not a conversation that says this is what should be done.
So we should start with actually a communication learning process.
Communication, basic, good communication. Yeah.
NVC, have you heard?
NVC is It's a very nice approach to inviting conversation. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But so jumping into, we are actually in this world and field of psychosomatic. But I would like to ask you about a subject that is very, I feel that it's coming up now very strongly. So trauma. Also as a huge impulse that reveals psychosomatic effects now then on many levels. So could you say explain maybe a new perspective, if we can say there is a new perspective of understanding trauma? What is it? How should we perceive it? And where this new perspective of trauma may lead us to? So how can it help us actually?
Yeah. So here I'm going to reference one of my main mentors, which is Peter Levine, because I think in many ways his work and his understanding of trauma changed the entire field of trauma in so many ways. In one way, it brought the word trauma to the foreground.
Yeah.
Before his work, people really talked about trauma as a physical injury, major physical injuries, like from a car accident, or the physical wounds from war, or things like that. And he really built a model that addresses what trauma really is and started talking about it. So a little bit of history to that is that he looked at how wild animals who are under constant threat respond to an attack. when in a predator-prey situation.
That doesn't have to be like physical attack. It doesn't. It can be just a threat of an attack.
Well,
right?
yeah, in humans for sure. The emotional attack, physical attack, etc., are all responded to in a very, very similar way by the nervous system. Okay? The model from the animal world makes it easier to understand this. So
Sure.
I'll go through that just a little bit. When a prey animal is chased, of course, it's running as fast as it can to get away. And then at some point, it will drop into shock. So it'll just shut down.
After it's finished, after the chase is
It
finished.
could be right before the chase is finished. Often it is because that state, when it's feigning death, when it goes into this state similar to death, stops the attack. Or it might have been physically attacked, but then it goes into shock. Okay. Predator, this isn't fun anymore. I'm not being able to chase it, and my appetite is no longer stimulated.
Sure.
Right? So it goes away. Eventually it goes away. This is one model. This is one variation of several possibilities. Eventually, the prey comes out of the shock state.
And how the shock looks like? What is the... Yeah, just a freeze?
Freeze. Another word for it would be freeze, yeah. It could be a flaccid freeze. It could be a rigid freeze. Both are what in physiological terms are called tonic immobility. But the term freeze is used in the psychology literature, not in the physiology literature. It's tonic immobility. They're the same thing. So it goes into this state to protect itself. Deep energy conservation. Low breathing, almost no breathing, lower heart rate, no digestion, etc. Like when we're in an anesthetic state for surgery, right? Or when we're in terror.
Yeah.
Same thing, all right?
And can I ask you, sorry to interrupt, but on the mind level, what happens in this shock?
Let's get there in a minute because it's very complicated, but I definitely want to get there.
Sure.
So what you'll see gradually with an animal is that it'll slowly come out of it. I'm very nonverbal too, so you're going to see me do this. Comes out of it, it orients itself. Oh, the coast is clear, the predator's gone. Shakes out all of that physiology, the adrenaline, the catecholamines, the cortisol, the norepinephrine, etc. It tremors it all out.
And for how long?
Resets. It could be for a few minutes. It could be for hours.
Really?
Yeah. In humans, it could be for even longer. Yeah. Yeah. Because it's built up such a charge.
Depending also on the
charge. Right. Right.
On the level of tension that is built before.
Exactly. Exactly.
Sure.
And what might be attached to it is anything that's happened in its life before that, especially with humans. It's like Velcro, right? So it sheds all that physiological, metabolic, and resets its nervous system. And then goes about its merry way until the next attack. Right?
Okay, the shake really can shake out all the levels, but how
with a wild animal, many times it can reset itself. Many times, not 100%, because it has been shown. Elephants are a great example of this. It has been shown that they will be traumatized.
Okay.
They may not reset.
Okay.
Completely. Yeah. With humans, of course, it gets more complicated because we also have a way to cognitively or intellectually override an attack, meaning we'll fight back, which is a good thing, or we'll judge ourselves. After the fact, I should have gotten away. Let's say sexual assault, or I should have done this, or I should have done. And what that does is it shuts down the ability to discharge or shed all that.
Like the natural impulse of the body.
It shuts down the natural impulse, exactly. And then if you add all the experiences that a human being has had until that moment, let's say at 18 years old, or maybe at 3 years old, what's happened before that, or we were talking about this earlier, transgenerationally, historically, what has been brought into that moment, right? And that's still in there.
Yeah, I have a question of, obviously, like,
Yeah.
I have my own intuition about it, and
Yeah.
also very interested in the subject, but is it really stored in the body? Like, really, really physically stored in the body? Can we say it?
That's an interesting question. It's stored in our brain, but our brain and body are only separated by everything going through the neck. It's the same thing, and one relies on the other relies on the one. So they're in constant communication. But our brain is where our memory is.
Sure.
It's not in our big toe,
Sure.
but our big toe is reacting.
Sure.
Right. So in that way, it's in our brain. Right? And we rely on it to quickly assess, do I know this sensory input from the outside of the body? Sounds, sights, tastes, smells. From the inside of the body, the way my body, my gut, etc., is reacting. We have a gut reaction. That's a real thing.
Yeah.
That happens before we understand what's going on.
So this is like a impulse that is like, it goes directly, connects to our memory, let's say.
It indirectly, but it's rapid, and we are reacting
faster
based on
than we cognitively.
Exactly. So we have a reaction, then we know what the reaction is.
So now, sorry to jump already to healing.
Yeah.
But then, is it that? Okay, so how much we can heal ourselves really from the traumas that are already stored in the brain, in our memory?
Yeah.
If the reaction is so fast and so rapid that, so I see the process here.
Yeah.
An impulse comes, right? So let's say I'm walking the street. I have a traumatic memory from my childhood related to, let's say, a certain smell.
Yeah.
So I'm walking the street now, and I smell this smell, and it reveals a body reaction. It reveals right away, because it's so rapid that it activates, right?
Yeah.
So my job is then to realize and to undo or quickly, massage myself out of this state. Is it the only way, or to kind of like work with the reaction that we have no power over, or can we heal ourselves from the traumatic, like deeply rooted wounds?
Yeah. So there are two questions in there. One is, what do we do in the immediate moment? Right? And if I can feel my physiological reaction, this smell comes in, I react to it. And that's exactly what happens. You're right. It's not I think about it or I have an emotion about it. I react to it. If I can feel that reaction.
So the body is first, right?
The body's first. If I can feel that reaction, then I can choose. I can soften. I can soften my tongue. I can relax my belly, as examples. If I can't feel it, then I'm at the whim of what is going to happen next. And so that's a primary thing. If I can feel, then I can do something. Not all the time, but many times. If I can't feel, then there's no choice involved. So that's one thing. Can we heal from trauma? The answer is yes. If it wasn't, I wouldn't be doing this work. Now, two aspects of that. One is Carl Jung toward the end of his life, and I will get this quote wrong, but it said something like, we don't really completely change with all the therapy that we do, but we loosen up a lot. We become a lot softer to our edges. Now, he was probably talking, my guess is more about character structure, personality, etc. It loosens up. It's not as rigid. And with trauma healing, yes, sometimes there's complete healing. Other times it really eases up a lot. And that's healing. So part of it depends on how do you find healing. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
One of the beauties of somatic experiencing, what Peter realized is that doing a little bit of work at a time, and I don't mean like one session, but even within a session, just the exposure to the similar physiology and awareness of it in present time.
Of this traumatic experience?
Yeah. If we say it's a one-time trauma experience, it's easier to understand it in terms of a one-time shock trauma, but it gets more complex with developmental trauma, relational trauma, more pervasive trauma experiences. And we can talk about that. If I can help a client feel the physiology of it in present time and pay attention, then so it comes toward matching the physiology of what happened during the car accident, let's say, just a little bit of the car accident, not all of it. Then they can downregulate, then they can settle from that, right? And then we can do a little bit more. It's like last night I was taking a pierogi making class. We added just a little bit of water to the flour first and stirred it, then a little bit more and stirred it. If you add it all at once, you get globs. Right? That's like prolonged exposure therapy. You get a mess. But if you do a little bit at a time, it can come out smoothly.
It's like with now the big subject is re-traumatizing.
It could be re-traumatizing. Exactly. And the beauty of his work is you do just a little bit at a time.
But how do you provoke these memories in the body?
That varies. Sometimes you need to trigger somebody a little bit, just a little bit. Like I might say, so you're walking down that street where you smelled that aroma.
What do you remember?
Now I don't even necessarily have to ask what you remember,
sure.
Because I'm seeing, or the word in somatic experiencing is tracking what's happening physiologically, what's going on with someone's breathing. How about their heart rate? What are their eyes doing? The color of their skin? Are they starting to look around, for example? And that's enough. That's all we need.
And then you concentrate on the body sensations?
That'll vary. Now, that'll vary. There are definitely skill sets and techniques in somatic experiencing, and then there's a lot of art to take the concepts and the principles, the supporting science, and apply it. So how we do it will be different, each practitioner, each client, etc. But let's say, I say to you, so you're walking down that street, see, and already you're starting to tighten up. Your jaw's getting a little tight. You feel it. Your eyes, and that's all. Say, hey, I might ask, what are you noticing? Or it might be a little too much to say, hey, let's wiggle, let's move around, right? Come out of that freeze state. I might invite you to soften your tongue. You might know, and your breathing changes immediately. Right? So that's what we call titrating it just a little bit and shift it, or pendulate, shift it. Right? Really give that time to settle. That's part of the discharge that couldn't happen initially.
The shake.
And then it might move to a shake. If a shake is going to be there, it doesn't always.
Okay. So I guess that there's like a, how do you say, like variety? No,
a lot of variety.
Variety of exercises and then possibilities.
And possibilities, right. A lot of variations on the theme. Part of it depends also on how traumatizing somebody's life and history have been.
Can I ask you just to go back to trauma itself?
Yeah.
So we jumped into physical trauma.
Yeah.
And trauma was perceived for many years as this, huge, probably on physical level event that left, or say, I don't know, probably people going into war. That was also perceived of like huge traumatic event.
Right.
But now there's so many, like on so many more subtle levels also we can say something was traumatizing for us.
Yeah.
Traumatizing for us. So could you give examples for what could it be for us, and what could trauma be for us in terms of more subtle examples, and also how to track if we have this PTSD syndrome, and how does it reveal itself?
Yeah. There's so many different experiences we can have. Yes, certainly from war, car crashes, relational trauma, being shamed over and over again
emotional,
as a child. Yeah, now we're in the emotional realm. Being bullied, which is emotional, it's physical,
so it can be a constant thing. So, for example, or long-term process.
Yes.
Or instant, very acute.
Yeah, and I call the long-term process more pervasive, meaning that the environment we live in is pervasively traumatizing. Growing up in poverty, growing up in a family where there's domestic violence, growing up in a war zone, growing up without food, growing up in relationships that are over and over again abusive. There's sexual trauma, motor vehicle crashes, natural disasters, and the list goes on. There's no shortage of trauma experiences, environments in the world.
So do we say that trauma is actually our reaction to an event or to an external situation?
Almost. I'm going to redefine trauma for a moment. We have two major branches of our nervous system. There are more details than this. There's one that is called voluntary, and that's when I say to myself, Dave, you're recognizing your mouth is dry, put your hand out to pick up this glass of water and have a sip. So the top down, I'm directing myself to do it. About 10 to 20% of how we function. Most of how we function is automatic or autonomic or involuntary, meaning that when I, for example, put my hand out, I have to adjust my posture. I'm not thinking about how to do that. When I take a sip of water, my breathing has to change. All my physiological processes, et cetera, et cetera. The autonomic nervous system has couple of different branches to it. One is called sympathetic, increase action. So, there's a flight of stairs. I have to walk up. My heart rate has to increase. My respiratory rate has to increase. My muscles have to have more blood flow, et cetera, et cetera. If I have to really do it quickly, I have to run for whatever the reason, then my digestion decreases as well. Then there's the parasympathetic, which is the reverse of all that. My heart rate can come down. My respiratory rate can ease up. I can go back into a digestive mode, rest and digest. That goes into another direction if I'm under threat or perceived threat or mortal threat. Then I'll shut down, like the prey animal, going into shock. Okay. So these two branches of the nervous system have a relationship that is supposed to be quite a regulated relationship.
Supposed to be.
Supposed to be. And will be under healthful circumstances.
Sure. The question is how
when it's
yeah. Do we live in this in this world that supports all these natural and balanced connections?
Well, we live in a world that provides us with a lot of opportunities to practice getting there.
Okay. Yeah.
Right.
Sure.
And so we're often dysregulated, where this nice balance is not quite balanced. Okay? If we look through the words of Chinese medicine, yin and yang are not in balance. And sympathetic, parasympathetic are not in balance. They're dysregulated. So if we want to speak in terms of neurophysiology, we can say, rather than the word trauma, we're dysregulated. And that opens up the understanding to a much bigger realm. Emotional, chronic pain, physical and emotional chronic pain, et cetera, et cetera. In fact, chronic emotional pain registers neurologically just like physical pain. Really? They are the same thing. They are the same thing in many ways. Yeah. Yeah.
So we can actually yes. Sorry, I had two thoughts at the same time.
I know that feeling.
There is I just actually, because maybe it's interesting to say that you're here in Poland because of Integrative Medicine Congress that we organize with our foundation. I think 3 congresses before, there was with us amazing Dr. Ann Lee Smith from Utah University, also a huge pioneer in the field of mind-body research. And as a doctor, as a medical doctor, he was one of the first one to, years ago, to introduce the scientific evidence of the mind-body connection, working with chronic pain. So I just, like, when you said it, it just like was ringing the bell. What he was saying also about that that it actually it's the same print. It's the same print.
It's the same imprint. It's the same principle.
Yeah.
And
the other thing that I was like, the second thought that I had, like the two
that's
tracks.
Good. You can remember your I'm just thoughts at one time.
That's why I'm writing them down. So sometimes instead of saying trauma, we can say dysregulation. Do I correctly understand it?
Yeah.
But I guess not all dysregulation can be PTSD symptoms, right?
This might be how you define PTSD. Now, the official psychiatric diagnostic manual that's used probably around the world, certainly in the United States, defines it with particular criteria. Chronic pain's not part of that, for example.
Could you say about these criteria? I'm thinking about people who may be interested listening to us.
People who have intrusive thoughts, flashbacks, people who avoid certain situations. There's a whole list. I don't even pay attention to it, so I don't have it all memorized, because I look at it as a much, much broader field. An area. In fact, I think Bessel van der Kolk, who is also one of the forerunners in research in this area, in mind-body kind of work, has even said almost everything in that manual should be under PTSD. Yeah. That's how broad it is. And like I said earlier, we live in a world, sadly, that provides a lot of opportunity for healing in this way.
This is actually a question that is like that I have for you about preventing trauma in the world of this much tension. And I have to bring it in with we're in Poland with a discussion of war threat. We have our neighbors, our friends at war. There's wars happening in the world, and definitely the danger grows. That's one type of huge trauma on level of it happening already. On the other hand, on the level of this anticipation, and the question would be also if anticipating such an event could be already traumatic. That's one thing. Another thing is we are actually regarding to the Integrative Medicine Congress that we are holding just in a few days, but it also much of it will regard nature, ecology, our relationship to nature. So we're not like as talking about holistic approach to health, integrative perspective of life. We're not separate from within ourselves, but also we're not separate from each other, and also we're just part of something bigger. It's like sometimes it's like just surprising to me that we have, like, how is it possible that we really perceive ourselves as separate? How is this possible? How is this even possible? Yet we do. Which makes us obviously individuals, which is it's not bad. It's not that like it's easy to say like this is good, this is bad. It's just like I see it more as the extremes that are dangerous. So it's natural that I see myself as a independent human being with my own individual needs, and listening to these needs and emotions is very important. But on the other hand, the separation led us to an edge. I see.
Right, and in individualistic cultures, that's what you're defining. Collectivistic cultures, it's a little bit different. Oh boy, there's so many questions in there, and I love all of this. Where to start? So, in terms of being in Poland and threat and Russia and Ukraine, but we can name regions all around the world.
Of course.
What can we do to not go into that kind of trauma freeze reaction and override it and again and again and again? In one way, it's very simple. In other ways, it's extremely complicated. But come back to softening your tongue. Just if you allow it to soften, right, then you can be worried, you can be anxious, but you don't have to do anxiety. Right? Your body, you can think, I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, but I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. Mm-hmm. They're very different. Mm-hmm. The thought can be the same, but the reaction different.
So you say like loosening the body, like to start from the body?
To start from the body. Well, in a way, you've got to start with knowing what you're thinking.
Yeah, sure.
But you're reacting, and then your body's reacting to the thoughts, and then your thoughts are reacting to the body, and it's nonstop. So how do you interrupt? Somatic experiencing is often, I call it an interruption therapy as well. So if we can interrupt that process, and I find doing it physically the easiest way. Mm-hmm. It's easy access, right? Maybe even just tighten your jaw. Yeah, right. Yeah. Tighten your jaw just a tad, like 5%. Tighten it, and now release the tightening. Right there, and everything calms down a little bit. Right. So if we can interrupt that process, then we can go on with what we need to do. Now, is that going to change the world? Is it going to change the politics? Is it going to change the whole environment? No, but it's going to change you. And then that can begin to change other people. If I can't feel, if I can't change that, then I can't choose, then I can't do anything.
What if it comes back, if it's just like loosening up for 5 seconds and then it comes back again?
It's not if it comes back, it will come back. It will. Until it doesn't. And it will again. It's, can it change? Not necessarily will it go away forever. We're meant to do that. We're meant to, because that makes us pay attention. It also, if we need to run, if we need to protect ourselves, that's the start of it.
The question, how do we judge, or how do we choose? When is the moment of running, and loosening up? Yeah,
we don't always choose consciously. Right. If I'm walking, again, relatively simple example. If I am crossing the street and I hear a loud screech of the brakes, my body's going to react and then behave. The behavior, let's say it's running, is one non-conscious choice. Stopping, freezing, is another non-conscious choice. Which one is chosen? It's not a. It's so instant.
But what about if we have, say, public exposure, right? So you have to make a lecture or something.
Yeah.
Or I have to. My
or
heart.
I have to in a couple of days from now.
You do. You actually do. But I guess you're familiar. But so let's take my example. So I have to give a lecture. My heart is bumping. It's not a thread. It's not a life thread, right? It's not something that my body instantly, as you described, reacts, and it's natural, and it's meant to protect me.
Right.
So it all starts with my mind and how I perceive the thread. It makes it way more difficult to follow this dialogue, right? Yeah. So to loosen up. If I, like, for example, if my level of anxiety and my level of stress is so high that it doesn't work anymore to just, loosen 5%, 10% and sustain it. Where do I start from there?
Yeah. Well, that's where it needs to be individualized to each person. So softening, I'll give you an example. I was working with a guy, this was a number of years ago, and he was a pianist. He was a concert pianist. But he said that there was something happening the way he was playing that was changing and not for the good. And he couldn't figure it out. So we're working around his anxiety and his depression and some of his history, and all that's going well, but his playing is not the way he wanted it to be. And so I said, let's do this. How about I meet you at your studio and I watch you play? And I knew he was a great pianist, and I just wanted to hear him play too. So I used it as an excuse. And I watched him, and he did the most subtle little thing with his jaw, and I'm going to get a little bit more anatomically detailed here, with his pelvic floor. Pelvic floor is the base of all our anxiety and our fear and our terror. That's where we start. Just a little bit. And so in an exaggerated form, he's playing like this, and his heart rate is up. Not as much as you're describing, but it's a similar situation. So I had him soften his tongue, and that worked for a little bit. But then he went right back to it. He said, look around the room. And this is for him. Look around the room. How many people are here right now? He looks around, softens. I guess just you. I said, yes, exactly. What did you think before I asked you? He said, well, I always practice as though I'm in a hall performing. So I said, well, don't do that. It was very simple in some ways, but for him it was really novel. It was really new. And then we did some other things too, because he was so focused forward, he would forget that there's a whole room there. So we had him expand that. I said, next time you're performing at a concert, just forget about everybody. Just that. It's you and the piano. And it changed everything. Right? So it was very top down, combined with the bottom up, the physical changes. And it changed how he was playing. So that was very individualized. You've really got to get to know the individual instead of make a blanket protocol for everybody.
Yeah. That actually reminds me an interview that I had with Sharon Salzberg, who's she's a meditation teacher, but mostly loving kindness meditation teacher. So she was saying about just in simplest way, actually what meditation is about is to let go of these additional perspectives and layers of perspectives that we have, just to really find ourselves at the root of the thing, of the, like, in the core of the thing. What is like the pure presence. So in the room I'm only you and me. That's it. There's no crowd behind me. But usually we go with these thoughts and with these interpretations and the future, the past.
And I agree with her 100%, not just for meditation, but in trauma healing work as well. And so much of it can be at a non-conscious level. And then we also consciously know some of our past, whether it's our lived life or transgenerationally. Like,
so many questions.
So many questions.
Yeah, because I wanted to ask you actually, like, how for okay, I'm gonna throw it in quickly. So for healing trauma, how do you think how important it is to dig into the history?
That's a really, really great question. In some ways, it's very, very important. And we're not working with the history. We're not working with shock trauma events. We're not working with pervasive trauma history or presentry. We're working with the physiological reaction
in somatic
to
experiencing.
In somatic experiencing. We're working with the physiological reaction to it. So I can't change. We're in Poland. We're in Europe. I'm Jewish, as you know, and I have spent time very purposefully in the past many days visiting. As you know, some of my roots are from Poland, visiting, because I want to feel it more than when I'm in the United States. And I would react, right? But I'm not I can't change what happened in the 1940s. I can't change what happened in the 1800s. I can't change a car accident that happened 10 years ago. But I can change my reaction and my relationship with them. And that's what has to change. If I'm always reacting as though they are present now, because I'm not conscious that they're not, then I'm constantly reinforcing this dysregulation.
And also, I guess, staying in the past is like this disconnection that is like...
It is a disconnection, that's
and,
right.
And it doesn't root us present.
That's right, that's
and,
right.
So I have the last question for you.
Okay.
I have like 100 more. But actually, it relates to what you say and what we talk about in terms of loosening up, opening up, versus I guess this disconnection and also fragmentation. So just like a big circle to integrative approach versus how did you say fragmented or reductionistic. So how would you say in the times of we are really difficult with rising tension, what can we do on daily life to loosen up, accept what you already said with being as aware as possible of our bodies, but to loosen up, to stay curious?
Yeah. Well, I think you just said it, to loosen up, to soften, and to receive, to be really curious about what people are saying, what people believe, who don't agree with you, who you don't agree with. To get to know them as human beings, not as a belief, not as a value. Can I get to know this person?
Though...
Can I allow them to get to know me as a person? Even though they disagree with me. There's a lot of polarization, for example, in the United States now. A lot. But I like to engage in conversations with people who agree with me, of course, but with people that don't. And I don't get into arguments.
You don't feel threatened?
I don't feel threatened, not at a personal level, no. I do at a political level.
Yeah, sure.
But I could feel threatened and stiffen up, or I can feel that is threatening. I don't like the possible direction this is going to go.
Okay, from this loosening up state, do you feel that it also allows an impulse into taking action?
Yeah, if we can't feel, we can't change, we can't choose action. So I might choose to do nothing. I might choose to get involved politically. I might choose to have other conversations. I might choose to walk away. Say, thank you, I need to go now. Right? If I choose to fight, then it becomes a problem. Right? But if I choose to be curious, then there's possibility. Yeah. But again, if I can't feel, then I can't choose.
So freedom of choice.
Feeling my reaction allows me freedom of choice, yes. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Dave.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you.